leaders in the world who are made for impact.
The main focus of our program was we had to write our definition of leadership. And the book we used was James McGregor Burns's book on leadership. And he said the crisis in leadership is intellectual, that people don't know what leadership is, so they can't do it. They can't teach others to do it. They don't even really recognize it when they see it, because many people have a misunderstanding that leadership is like power over.
I'm Gretchen Schott, and this is Made for Impact, a show for leaders who want to leave a lasting impact on their organizations, their teams, and their lives. My guest today is Dr. Vicki Halsey. She's an inspirational speaker, trainer, author, and instructional designer. As Vice President of Applied Learning for the Ken Blanchard Companies, Vicki partners with organizations to design and deliver programs that meet their needs through interactive workshops, keynotes, and e-learning experiences. Vicki is the co-author of Blanchard's legendary service program and the SL2 experience. She also crafted the Master of Science in Executive Leadership program for the University of San Diego and has taught 42 cohorts of executive MBA students and Masters of Science of Executive Leadership. And if that wasn't enough, she is also a national champion platform and springboard diver. I am so excited for you to learn with Vicki today. Let's dive in. Oh, Vicki, thank you so much for being with us today. I am so excited for my listeners to hear your wisdom.
Oh, thank you, Gretchen. I'm excited that there are people here that want to learn more about leadership and about bringing out the best in other people. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So in case folks are listening and they don't know who you are, tell our audience just a little bit about you, like who you are, where you're from, maybe even share like where you're recording from.
Ooh, well, I'm recording from San Diego, where it is actually raining, which we need the rain. So that's lovely. Some people are like, no. And I'm like, yay. I have a lifetime of leadership. And I'm Vice President of Applied Learning for the Ken Blanchard Companies. And what that means is I design and deliver learning experiences that people can't wait to apply. I have a cute husband, 2 lovely sons, and, was a school administrator. So watch out. It's hard to discipline, I can take care of anything. And that's me. I authored quite a few different books or co-authored. My favorite's Brilliance by Design, how to bring out the brilliance as you design learning experiences. So I'm just so grateful to be here today with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think everyone who is here is not in San Diego is going to be jealous. We actually have sunshine today in Indiana, but usually in February, that is not the case. So normally I would say my favorite place to go is San Diego because of all the sunshine. So
that's why people are a little bummed. They're, it's like when they come, it's like, it's raining. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm so happy because we need it.
So you mentioned about working for the Ken Blanchard Company, and my experience with Ken Blanchard's company has really been a couple ways. One, the 1 Minute Manager. I've read Ken's book, like Who Moved My Cheese, years ago, raving fans. But the latter part of my career, I've really been studying and working with folks talking about situational leadership. And so I know that you're an expert in the SL2 model. Can you provide just an overview of the SL2 model, kind of like its key principles for our listeners who may not be familiar with it?
Yes. And I think I'd like to just have people think about leadership for a second. Because when I start a keynote or any session on leadership, I ask people, does the world need leaders? And everybody raises their hand. I mean, that's, how many of you're listening? How many of you think the world needs leaders? But then I want people to think about, what are you hoping for? What are you hoping for? Just imagine that. What do you really want? If you thought, this is what great leaders do and are and etc. I think that's an important thing to think about as you step into a leadership position or continue your leadership position. Because you'll love this. I'm the world's longest doctoral student. Took me 7 years to get a doctorate, but I had 2 babies. And you can imagine, Gretchen, baby dissertation. And obviously the babies They just won hands
They
down.
just slow down
They
that
just-
whole writing process.
They were like,
They're so needy.
cute. No, I couldn't resist them. But what was interesting is the main focus of our program was we had to write our definition of leadership. And the book we used was James McGregor Burns's book on leadership, Pulitzer Prize winning book. And he said there was a crisis in leadership. But that book was written in 1979. And he said the crisis in leadership is intellectual, that people don't know what leadership is, so they can't do it. They can't teach others to do it. They don't even really recognize it when they see it, because many people have a misunderstanding that leadership is like power over. Leadership means I have a sign, follow me, and everybody's going to follow me. And yet anyone who's reported to someone knows there are certain reasons why you follow that leader. And one of them is they are clear. And here's, just so you have this, everyone, here's my definition that took 7 years to write. Leadership is an influence relationship among leaders and followers who achieve real change, actualize real change. So what does that mean as we step into the situational leadership too, the SL2 model? It's leadership is about influence. Now think what your best leaders do. Influence means I want to influence you with everything I know, everything, that we need you to do, that you need to do, that you want to do. I'm going to influence with everything I've got. But I want you influencing me with everything you've got. You see, that's, I think, a big distinction, because leadership is about influence, and it's a relationship, which is where it's not a business relationship. It's a relationship. I care about you. I care about who you are, what you want to do, how you want to show up. And I care as your leader to help you become everything you're capable of being. And then it is about real change. Are we constantly moving toward what needs to be done? So that's where SL2 comes in, and that definition. So everyone who's listening, make some notes. Think, what do you believe leadership is? Because you'll layer it with what's important to you: inclusion, diversity, trust. There's so much that whoever you are personally, you might want to bring into a definition of leadership, and tell everybody what it is. Teach your people what you believe. Tell them, I want you influencing me as much as I'm seeking to influence you. And here's where the cool model comes in. So I brought a picture. Da-da-da, there you go.
I love
Can you
it.
see
I love a good picture.
There we go. So there's
Beautiful.
There we go. I'll go backwards. So there's the SL2 model. Now, what is interesting about this as a model is that it teaches you as leaders to, first of all, if someone says, I need help, do you have a minute? It teaches you to be situation specific. What's the goal or task? So there's a takeaway for everybody straight away, right? From this point on, someone says, I need help. You're going to say, on what? What's the goal or task? And then you actually, if you think about our model and you think about SMART goals, we talk about that only because the more specific and the more trackable the goal is, the more it activates people's physiology to actually get it done. There's a lot of neuroscience. I just finished MIT's Neuroscience of Business, super cool program. They said that the goal actually gets your physiology moving. And if it's fuzzy, what happens to our physiology? It's like, bleh, don't really have to do that. And by the way, I think it's important to say leadership happens conversation by conversation. So we're talking about this model can be used because you lead in many different constructs, right? Gretchen, think about it. You lead in context of self. Am I getting my needs met? You lead one-to-one. Am I meeting the needs as a leader of my team? Am I, I can lead the whole team at the same time. And I might lead organizational change, which would be the organization. So this is sort of the one-on-one construct that we're talking about with the model. So as you think of working with someone, first of all, what's their goal? So maybe their goal is to do a webinar once a month on a best practice from my team. It's not maybe a goal, it might be more of a task, but that's the target the person's trying to reach. Now, SL2 would say, okay, people are at 4 different development levels on the goals and tasks they're working on. All right. Because they could be working on doing their expense report. They could be doing a presentation with their team. They could be running an offsite. They could be selling to a high profile client. All of those, they're going to be at different development levels. So what are those development levels? Think about it. When someone starts, when they're excited to do a task, they're a D1. A D1 means enthusiastic beginner. They're fired up, but they don't know what to do yet. Okay, so imagine someone, let's just use a really easy thing, learning to ski, right? They're super excited. The skis are on, they're fired up, but they've never skied before if they're brand new. The second stage of development happens as they start to ski, which is wah. And it's yes. And this is kind of your people a couple weeks into the job, right? New employee orientation. They're like, woo. And then a couple weeks, there are things that are blowing people's gaskets. Well, what's the difference? The competence is still low, but now the commitment's gone down to the task. So each development level is based on just 2 things, competence and commitment. So you're fired up, but you don't know what to do. Then you're not fired up and still don't know what to do. Now, assuming we use the skiing story, after a little while, depending on your transferable skills. So if people bring a lot of skills, maybe they rollerbladed, or they're very comfortable skateboarding, things where you're flying along, athletic, they could get to what we call D3 pretty fast. So what's interesting for a leader, a D3 means they're skiing. Like you would look out, as you're drinking your hot toddy and you'd go, look at them go. And they are skiing. But there's a lot of what we call metacognating. Metacognating meaning make sure you do this, keep the knees bent, keep fluid, keep your arms in. And they're telling themselves a lot of what to do, how to do it, etc. while they're skiing. And then the last stage we're trying to move everybody to is D4, which is bring it on and you've got this. So as you think of your team, you realize different people are at different development levels based on the things they're working on. So people aren't a development level, they are at development levels. So you could think for a second, who's brand new to something, fired up? Where are people on the goals and tasks super frustrated and not excited? Where are they pretty good to go? But they're nervous, anxious. I call that wonky emotion. They may have some wonky emotion. And there's other things that they're really good at. So everybody's at all these different stages. But here's what's super interesting. When you think of all of us on this call, our research, millions of people in our database shows, well, here you go. There are 4 leadership styles to meet those 4 development levels. But our research shows 54% of us only use one of the 4 leadership styles comfortably. Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
54% only use one. 34% can use 2 styles naturally. And 11% use 3 and only 1%. But I'm hoping by the end of listening to this, you all will be able to flex your leadership style to move people to D4 on the things that they need to work on, self-reliant achievers that they need to work on. Well, how do you do that? You have to learn, as you look at this, it's based on amounts of directive behavior and supportive behavior. So imagine if I don't have much competence on a task, what do I want? Give me direction. Show me how. Now, what's interesting is that's a style 1, high direction, but you don't want to muddle their brain with too much support, meaning that you're all like, oh, you're going to be great, Gretchen, everything you've done. Your brain's fatigued by the time I gave you direction. So this is where you lead with direction. And what we know, and I bet all of you that are listening, you know this. Oh, that feels like it might be micromanaging. I don't want to micromanage anyone. So that belief will not serve you if you're working with a learner, because learners crave direction. You get a new phone, maybe one you've never worked before. What do you want to know right away? How do I use it? Or a new computer? Or let's do this. And you want
all my data
direction.
Come over.
So learners crave direction. They want to know how to do things. So you're giving them that gift. And if you think of the leadership definition, this is where you're seeking to influence them with all you know. And I think what's important for our listeners is, remember I said there are 4 stages of development and the final stage is D4, which means superstar at that goal or task. Well, here's your second tip of the day. I mean, there's been a lot, but the first one was to be goal or task specific in conversations. So when someone says, I need help, do you have a minute? Can I talk to you? From now on, you're going to say about what? What's the goal or task? Then you would want to diagnose people. But when you realize that you're talking to a D4 and you're looking at your team, take a moment here. Who does something so well you wish everyone on your team would do it? Who are you're just like at that task, they make the most incredible after action reviews, or when they do a sales presentation, it's awe-inspiring. They can close those. Well, here's the deal. Leaders, this is the rigor that it takes. Start capturing best practices. Start capturing. What do they do that is so awe-inspiring? Because what happens? Then when you have a brand new person, quote, a D1, and you're trying to do that style 1, high direction, low support, show them examples of what a good job looks like. So they need a SMART goal, but they also need to see. If you're saying you need to make a 1-page job aid on a subject, here you go. Here's what it looks like. And the neuroscience of that, just like the neuroscience of the clearer, the more specific and trackable the goal, the more people want to achieve it. It's the same with showing an example of what a good job looks like, because the brain stores in images, not words. So think about that. What does that mean? Everyone's like, what? That means if I tell you don't picture a pink elephant, no, don't do it. Don't put big purple spots. Don't do it. No, you're picturing it. So that's why it's important to give any way you can give examples when people are new to a goal or task. So what's important is when they're first starting, they want high direction, but low support. But when do they want the high supportive behavior? When they hit the wall. When it's like, this task is terrible. I am not enjoying. I'm feeling vulnerable. I remember at Blanchard when Ken Blanchard said, Vicki, right after 9/11, he said, we need a virtual offering because people aren't flying. And I was like, I've got this, Ken. I'm going to create this. Oh, it was just awful. My D2 was so bad. Half the class had hung up before I started.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh.
But it was such a great learning, which is like, I had to just go, wait a minute, Vicki, you're not a big loser. You're just a disillusioned learner. This is D2. You got that growth mindset, that people hear about. You're going to grow and you're going to, come on, hunker down. Let's get back in the game. Where did people hang up? What was going on there? And so I needed a style 2 at that point. I needed someone to come along and give me high support. What have you learned? Praise my progress, right?
Encouragement, yeah.
Yes, encouragement. And then I still need high direction because I was kind of failing, if I had to say it that way. It just wasn't going terribly well.
Right.
So imagine when you think of the leadership definition and operating from a leadership standpoint, transformational leadership standpoint, you're trying to help everyone become all they're capable of. These 2 styles, that's when you're really wanting to influence. But now, let's say I'm a D3 because I've done 8 sessions, maybe, right, of that virtual offering. Well, now things are going pretty well, but I'm so nervous. I have like notes everywhere all over my desk. I have Post-it notes. Make sure you do this. Like right now, I have one that says, breathe and lower your voice, drop your chin. Because when I get going, I start squeaking. Oh, that was one of the special comments someone made to me. They said, on my first virtual training, they're like, so Vicki, I just want you to know we're not at Disneyland and you're not Minnie Mouse.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Talk about D2. Because I was getting nervous and my vocal cord got really high. And I was like, okay, everyone, let's go. So it was really embarrassing. So moving along though, who are your people that call you all the time? And you think to yourself, why are they calling me? They can do this. Well, why are they calling you? They want support for their voice. So anytime they say, what should I do about this? This is where you flip to you want to be influenced. This is where you say to them, well, what do you think you should do? What else could you do? This is where they have the competence. They just don't have the confidence. So this is where you would ask them. But many leaders want to add value by sharing their expertise. So if someone says, what should I do? And we tell them.
Just start, telling, just verbal vomit all over them.
Gretchen, what does that do to their confidence?
Yeah, just ruins it.
It does. But what are you trying to do if you're a leader trying to bring out the best is you want them to believe in themselves.
Yeah.
So ask them, well, what else could you do? Use the great tell me more. Everybody wants to hear that from their leader. Tell me more. And what's wonderful if you get good at this, because what I see is style 3 is all about supporting.
Mhm.
And what I notice when people think they're doing a style 3, which is I want to build their confidence, etc. So they tell them.
Mm-hmm.
So Gretchen, you say to me, oh, I'm doing this big webinar. I'm a little nervous. And I'm like, oh, Gretchen, why would you be nervous? You're so good, blah, 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 blah. I think I'm being super helpful. I'm not giving you direction. But because I didn't let you talk out your ideas, I never delegate comfortably because I didn't hear your ideas. And by the way, you don't move all the way to D4 because Vicki always jumps in and tells me how to do it. So leaders who are listening, once your people have competence on a goal or task, let them talk. Let them share with you. You learn from them and they learn from themselves. And they go, wow, check out what I just came up with. That means you can move to style 4 next time. And here's the interesting thing about just one little nit on D4. This is where we're trying to get people to. Style 4 is about keeping your top talent coming back. And everyone that's listening, think about that. What makes you want to keep being fired up about a task? What could your leader do? Well, you know the number one thing? Value their contribution. Let them know that they are so important and what they do matters to you, the team, the organization. And I think what's important there is if they have a big win, you know what people typically do if someone that's a D4 on a task has a big win? In a team meeting, they go, and we're really grateful to Judd today. He blah, 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 blah. Stop. Whose voice should be heard if people are D3s or 4s? Their voice. So what do you want to say? Judd, you knocked it out of the park this week. Would you share with everyone, how did you do that? He steps into his power. The whole team learns from his expertise. And it's a really cool way to keep people feeling important. So that's in a nutshell, pretty long nutshell, but it was still, it's a lot.
And I loved I was giggling inside when you gave your definition of leadership, because I often talk about this and I say that leadership is an influence relationship and management is an authority relationship. And so you were like speaking my language right there. And I really appreciate how you describe that delegating, because I often think that when people think about delegating, if you're in management, you have direct reports, they think about delegating as a way to get rid of the stuff that they don't want to do and give people experience on earning their cred or earning their bones, if you will, right? Like, I'm going to give you stuff to do versus thinking about delegating that voice, delegating the expertise that comes with that, right? And so really leaning into ways in which you can recognize that growth by empowering that individual to share their learning, share what they do. They're kind of like their secret sauce.
And I love what you're saying. And I'd like to make a distinction around delegating tasks, because you could delegate a task to someone who's never done it before. So they're a D1 if they're excited to get the task. They're a D2 if not so excited. Oh, great. I'm in charge of the budget now. Thanks for nothing. And maybe they've never done a budget. So remember, if you think of the global sense of delegating tasks, it's important to diagnose the person on the task. Because if you remember, Oh, it was great. The empowerment movement. What did the empowerment movement? People were like, no, because someone was like, I'm going to empower you, which meant basically, I'm going to give you all the work I don't want to do, and you're empowered to do it. But no one taught them how. You see, it's all about the how. With a D1 and 2, meaning those first two stages of development, they need you to share with them how. It's the same if you're delegating a task to them they've never done. And then if they've done it before successfully and you delegate, if they're a little nervous, you want to listen to, well, I see you, having done this before, but why don't we take a little time and you talk out some of your ideas for what you're going to do? Give them the airtime to listen to their own voice if they're nervous. And if they're a D4, that's when it's great to do what oftentimes is done with delegating tasks, which is, hey, you've got this. I'm here if you need me.
Right.
But valuing what they are doing is super. I love what you're saying. Super important.
I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed to learn that only 1% of us actually work through all 4 of those styles, which it makes sense. Like we do what we're comfortable with and what's worked for us, right? And so if you're a great coach, you're going to look at everything as like, oh, this is a coaching opportunity versus this might be an opportunity for me to delegate and empower them to speak into their expertise versus me kind of coaching that out of them, right? Or mistaking supportive and coaching. They think that they're being a good coach by being encouraging versus trying to draw out what the actual issue is that they need some support around, right?
That's the rigor of leadership. Like we think one-on-ones should be where people come to you having listed the top 3 things they want to talk about. They tell you this first task, I'd like to have information. I want the steps I need to take and the people I need to talk to. So basically they just said, I'm a D1 at this first task. Think how empowering that is. And then they might say, they don't even have to use the language, but that I need airtime. I need a sounding board. I need to run my ideas by you at this second task. So they're saying, basically, I'm a D3 at the second task. I just want you. I don't want advice. I wanted advice in the first one, but now I want to hear, my own ideas. And there's a really neat thing about being a leader who can approach the situation differently with a flexible leadership style, because everything we're talking about kind of shifts you from a self-focused leader, what do I want to do for this person, to an other-focused leader. What do they actually need on the goal or task? And it's this weird stopgap that says, wait a minute, okay, I'm working with this person. They're here on this task. They're there on that. Because I think we butt up against some beliefs we're taught in school, maybe, which is you have to be consistent. Oh, well, I don't want to do this for that person if I'm not going to do it for this person. Well, here's the interesting thing. You need to be consistently inconsistent, because it would be a mistake to always use the same style, which would mean maybe you're one of those, you're very comfortable with direction. Well, everyone that's listening, think where you're a D4. How many of you are pretty good drivers on our call today?
Yes.
And how many of you love it when there's a little helper next to you in the car just giving you their little pointers for how to drive? You're like, take that.
Gosh.
But that's just someone giving direction when you're competent.
Mm-hmm.
It's called over supervision. But think of the last time the flip side, were under supervised. You couldn't get direction if your life depended on it. So I think it's really important to be consistently inconsistent based on the goal or task and the person. And there's just so much to consider. I think people that are listening, start practicing with your own to-do list. Where are you a D1, 2, 3, 4 on your task? Are you asking for what you need? An interesting tip of the day for everyone listening is that the clearer you are about your needs, the more promotable you are. How many of you want to be promoted? Woot, woot. Well, listen to that. Let's say Gretchen's my boss. And I say to Gretchen, hey, Gretchen, it's like 10:42 in the morning. Hey, could I talk to you for like 10 minutes at lunch today? And she's an awesome boss. Oh, of course.
Yes.
Okay, now imagine I hang up or whatever. What is Gretchen thinking about between now and noon?
100 things.
100 things. Is Vicki quitting? What have I done? She might even have called a few of my peers. What's going on with Vicki? She's like one of my best people. I don't want to lose her.
Right.
I did that to Gretchen by not saying to her, hey, Gretchen, could I talk to you for about 10 minutes at noon today about my webinar I'm doing on Friday? I'd like to run some ideas by you so I can make a decision how to start it. You see what I just said? I'm competent. I lack a little confidence in the beginning. I want to run my ideas by you. You get to be my sounding board. Here's the difference. The first time when I walk in, your brain's already fatigued and we haven't even had the meeting yet. We do this to the people around us. We do this to the people around us by being unclear about what we need. And people want to help. So they're always going to try and get in their brain. But the second way, how do you feel now when I told you exactly what I needed, Gretchen? What happened?
Right. You know exactly how to show up. Absolutely. And excitement and even coming with ideas. I love that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I talk often with managers and leaders that they need to have a point of view, especially when we're talking with individuals that say things like, well, I want to grow with the organization. And I just want you to tell me, like, what do I need to do to grow in this company? And my first question is always like, well, what's your point of view on growth? Like, where do you want to grow? You need to know. The days of a manager saying you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this are so far gone. Our workplace is so much more fluid. There's so many more opportunities, I believe, for individuals to demonstrate their growth and to be creative in what their career journey even looks like. But it all comes down to you have to have a point of view as to what you want that to look like and then share that with your manager. It's on your manager. When you share that, it's on the manager then to either affirm or deny, like, hey, we're not going to be able to help you with that here. But I love that you want that. That's not us, right?
Yes.
Or love that you want to do that. Let's get creative on how we can find the money or, find an opportunity that will be like that we can afford and provide that opportunity for them. But just blatantly throwing things out there to just spray and pray that they'll just show up and they're going to suddenly be better leaders just doesn't work anymore.
Exactly. And I just think that sort of brings a mindset of who we are as leaders, right? Our mission is to really bring out the best in every one of our team members. But occasionally where I'm finding people when I'm doing coaching, et cetera, they're like struggling with constructive feedback, like when someone isn't moving in the direction. Well, here's the cool news about capturing what a good job looks like, what a standard is. You will know much faster if the clearer you are about what the job is, the more you'll be able to help someone who it may not be their strength. That is not something they do well. So it's like, well, let's get you on a different team, where you can unleash your strengths. I mean, I helped a guy a while back because he was like, I just hate these team meetings. And I go, I know. I said, I feel like you are more of an individual contributor. You don't like listening to other people's ideas. You don't like building on their ideas. You want to be the guy with the ideas. And he's like, yes. So we just moved him out of the team where everybody was pinging off each other because it wasn't who he wanted to be. And he saw what a great team member looks like on that team. And he realized, I don't like doing that kind of stuff. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that. Well, what a gift. It's his life we're talking about. It's such an interesting mindset because you've heard like people are the most important asset,
Always.
And you're like, always, except I've changed that to people aren't the most important asset. People are actually the organization. So if you're listening right now, it's your people that are getting results. They're the ones you need to fuel and, get them excited about what they're doing. And I think that's another aspect of this model is really helping people. When you think of the SMART, SMAR, the relevance, do people know why their job's so important? I was with a major financial company a while back, and the guy's in the room learning SL2, and he's like, well, I'm not important. I'm just on the help desk. Like, oh, buddy, a broker, his computer, when the world's going, whatever, and he's trying to sell, can't get things to work. You're critical, but no one had told him. So everyone who's listening, think, Have you told your people how they are so important? Are you getting them to appreciate the work they do? Do you start your meetings with praisings and appreciation? Hey, and
Oh,
that's an
yeah. Wow.
important little nit for everyone when you're dealing with whatever development level. People want to be appreciated. But how do most people appreciate people? This goes with the brain stores and images, not words. How do people usually appreciate people? Gretchen, it's like, Gretchen, good job.
Call them out.
Nice
Yeah, right.
work. Woohoo. Big. Yes, great job. Goes in one ear and out the other. So anyone that's listening, if you want to appreciate people, you need to say specifically what they did, but then the added bonus is how it made you feel. I'm so proud to work with someone who was willing to stay late on the phone with that customer, and they just knocked it out of the park today because of you. You make a difference, but tell them specifically what they did that you appreciate, because then it makes a picture, by the way. Oh, this has a double loop again. It makes that person feel important, but what did you do for the whole team? You let them see best practices. So when you start your meetings off with, let's appreciate each other for what we've done this week, I think that's a really cool way to sustain people's passion for what they do, but also learn from each other, because people are the company.
There's a piece of that too, I think, though, that again, knowing your people, because there are some people that definitely, I agree, everyone wants to be appreciated, but some people will get very embarrassed and uncomfortable in hearing that in front of all of their peers, right? So just tell me one-on-one, don't make me the center of attention. And by calling me out as the center of attention actually works against them, right? And so I think that as a manager, you really need to be clear on letting that person know. And if you want to bring that to the group, saying, and in our meeting, I'm going to ask you to highlight like what you did in this situation so that others can learn from it. And so set them up to be successful when you delegate that, versus just calling them out and saying like, we just want to really thank you for everything you do. And how did you do that? And they're like, everyone's looking at me and I just want this meeting to be over. Can we
I
just
want to
get
be
on the
swallowed
agenda?
up.
Right? Right? So
But that's a great thing to tell everyone. Ask your people, if I were to recognize you for a good job, how should I do that? And sometimes I'm going to need you to share how you did things. So how can I do that? Do I need to, a couple days heads up,
days
which you
notice,
always
right?
do? Absolutely. Everybody would need to know. You're not just going to boom, call on them right away, because people need time to think. But that's so important, Gretchen. Thank you for bringing that up. Ask your team, how do you like to be appreciated? That's a great question for everyone.
I want to talk a little bit about you. Just you've done such a great job sharing the model, but I want to hear a little bit more about your experience. So, where do you feel like in your life that you've made an impact?
Well, that's a nice global question. Where
I
have
know.
you made an impact? It's very funny. The first thing that pops into my mind was I got kicked out of preschool, for being too precocious. I guess I was a pain in the poposita. But anyhow, so what did I do? I started my own preschool. So bottom line, I feel like where I've made a difference is almost from the time I could walk and talk. I've really wanted to bring out the brilliance in others. I would make little worksheets so that people could do things to help them be successful. You've heard a lot about mental illness and people struggling. And I think as leaders, we need to be very sensitive to that, because the three most popular messages I received as a child were, people like you won't make it in the world, Vicki. I was adopted, by the way, with very different genetic makeup. All right. So just know, but that was the first comment. People like you won't make it in the world. 2, if I had any kind of enthusiasm or was even remotely upset about anything, I got, why don't you grow up? When I won the nationals, my mom said, make sure if you win, you open up this envelope. And the envelope said, don't walk around like you think you're good.
Oh my goodness.
So where have I made a difference, you ask? I was so appalled by these daily messages that the second I got out of the home, I'm going to make everyone feel important. I'm going to make everyone feel brilliant. I'm going to do everything I can to just create a space where I figure out what you'd like to do for you, and I'm going to help you do it. I mean, one of the models that I created is the engage model in Brilliance by Design. And I mean, let's energize people. That's the E. As they show up to a meeting, show up to a training, are at work each day. Are you energizing people? And if you're running a meeting, and this is just a little template for all of you that run weekly meetings. I mean, how many of you sit in a meeting and think, I could so be doing something else right now? And partially it's because someone's talking at you. They're not listening to your voice. I believe 70-30 is the percentage, which is 30% is a facilitator, a leader, etc., running a meeting. 70% is the people dialoguing. So if you think about engage, and you can see this model on vickihalsey.com, VICKIHALSEY.com, if any of you want more about the engage. But it's just, I just do a little quick video, and it's a kind of an old website, but it has some cool resources that are just free for you. But do we let people get engaged? Because the N is navigate content, which is where I'll share something. I mean, if I'm the CFO, instead of just going, here's the numbers, blah, 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 blah. Well, how am I going to flip it to getting 70% participation? I'm going to put something up and I'm going to say, what do you notice? Where did we have the greatest wins? Do you see flipping to, you can go ahead, everyone, make your meeting PowerPoint and then go right back in and think, how could I flip it to ask versus tell?
Wow.
Do you see? How could I get them involved? And by the way, the G, so E and G would be, why do we care about our numbers? Generate meaning. Generate meaning. E-N-G-A, how can we apply this? What's something you want to do from what you just learned? The next G is gauge and celebrate. Do you have fun little quizzes? If you just showcased something in a meeting, do you get people to do a quiz on it? What were the answers? What that does is myelinate the axon in the brain. So that helps people really learn something and be able to move it to action. And that's the last E of the engage model, is to extend learning to action. So do you follow up with people when you've taught them how to do something? If it's a new sales process, etc., do you keep it alive? But so where I've made a difference is I've taught this to so many people, and I feel like what they realize is that's their job. Their job is to create a space where people feel energized and motivated to act from the time with you. So the only time people leave a conversation with you is if you've given them the right amount of direction, support, you've heard their voice, you've helped them be engaged. That's where I like to fire people up in my keynotes, etc. There's always actionable items. And
I love it. Well, I think we're going to have you back just to talk about Brilliance by Design another day, because that sounds like we could get more into that. Like that's a whole nother day. But I would love to have you back to talk about that. If folks listening want to get connected with you, want you to come keynote, or want to learn more about the things that you're doing, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh, just email me, Vicki, VICKI, .Halsey, like the admiral or the singer, depending on your demographic.
I know I was thinking the singer.
SEY at Blanchard, BLANCHARD.com. Feel free to email me. If you want any of the things I've said, I can send you the engage model, whatever you'd like. So love to connect with your audience, your amazing audience.
Thank you, Vicki. This has just been so helpful. I know folks are going to walk away and they're going to just start applying different communication styles, and it's going to be wonderful. So thanks so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope everyone learned a few tips and tricks to help people be magnificent, because we send our people home to their families, and how they treat their family is how sometimes they've been treated at work. So keep up the good work, send them home happy and fulfilled from work. Thank you. Thanks, Gretchen.
Thanks, Vicki. All right. I hope that you took some notes. That was amazing. She had so much good information. I want to leave you with a couple of the lessons that I really loved that she shared with you guys. One, I hope that you write down your definition of leadership. As you listen to this show and as you hear these wonderful speakers, I love that she challenged you to think about, what is your definition of leadership? So if you haven't done that, be sure to write that down and start sharing it. Test it out. Because sometimes we write things and then we say them and we're like, wait, I didn't mean it that way. But share it with others. I also loved that she asked that question about how are you showing you value your employees' contribution? Think about what does that look like? How are you recognizing your people? It was so fantastic. And I also loved the who does a task better than others, capturing their best practices. So I would love it if you would spend time this week looking at your team, figuring out who is that person that's got some tribal knowledge that is just amazing. And everyone on your team, if they could do that, that you can figure out what is it that they do and apply it to your employees. I love it. I think all those were great. I hope that you got as much out of that conversation as I did, but make a plan to implement some of these great ideas that she shared today. If you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, be sure to check that out too. Go to www.growthreefold.com/made-for-impact and sign up for the newsletter. I want you to apply what we're learning. I'd love for you to reach out and tell me what resonated with you and what's making an impact on you. But in the meantime, I want you to remember that you are made for impact.